Everyone to our first COEHS Faculty and Student Research Colloquium. The college is hoping to use this ongoing series to highlight student and faculty research, and we thank Dr. Hasebe for being our first presenter today. Our hope is to create a culture of research that inspires our undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral students, as well as to conduct research, as well as our faculty, to identify areas of collaboration, as well as to help prepare for presentations, as well as doctoral and master's defenses. If you're interested from the college, if you're interested in presenting in this colloquium, please don't hesitate to contact the Dean's office and we'll help you get signed up for that. So what we thought we would do before we start the actual colloquium, where Dr. Hasebe will probably talk for about 30 minutes or so, is to go around and introduce ourselves. So I will start that and then we'll just continue to kind of move around. So I'm Dr. Katrina Daitner. I'm the Associate Dean in the College of Education and Human Services. In terms of thinking about my research and in terms of collaborations, my particular interests are related to language development and working with, in particular, looking at language development of preschool and kindergarten age. All right, so I'm just gonna call people out because just to make it easier. So Dr. Carr, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I'm the interloper today. I'm a theologian, and Yuki has shared some of her research with me, so I'm just wanting to hear her present on it here as well.
Great, thanks, Dr. Carr. Next, Dr. Polubinski.
Hi, I'm Renee, and I'm the chair in kinesiology, and I saw the title in the background, and I was intrigued to listen to this colloquium today.
Great, thanks, Renee. Stacy, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Stacy Sissing May, and I work for Senator Jim Carlin, who's running for United States Senate. I used to work at River City Church, and that's how I got to know Yuki. And so we stay in connection with one another, but I am interested in joining this because I love education, and I've worked with my children with homeschooling and taught at schools in the past. And so I'm happy just to be involved in something like this today.
Great, thanks, Stacy. Dave, do you want to go next?
Hi, my name is Dave Thomas. I'm actually a student of the environmental science program. I just simply saw the title and I was kind of intrigued, so I was like, okay, I'll just sign on since I have the time.
Great, thanks, Dave. And I apologize, I'm probably going to mispronounce your name. Bolak?
It's Bolake.
Bolak?
Bolake.
Bolaki,
So I'm a
thank
graduate
you.
student. Okay, thank you. I'm a graduate student at the communication department. I got the mail and I'm just curious. I want to know what the segment's about. So that's one thing. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Dr. Sheffield?
Hey everybody, apologies, my video is not on, but I am actually driving to go pick up a university vehicle for a recruitment trip we have tomorrow. So I am the assistant dean of the College of Education and Human Services. I was before that the director of the School of Ed since it became an academic unit. And Dr. Hasebe is a member of the School of Education, and I'm familiar with her work. I've read her published pieces and actually did a little bit of providing feedback for her as she worked through those. So wanted to join to hear more of what she has to say and to support her in her important research endeavors.
Great, thanks, Dr. Sheffield. And then I think our last person is Dr. Pettit.
Yes, I'm sorry. I not using video. This is my only time to eat lunch, so I'm going to distract other people by doing that. I'm in the philosophy department, and occasionally teach about morality. And so I wondered what people from other disciplines, how this might be approached differently from how we do in philosophy.
Great. Thanks so much. So I'm just going to do a little introduction of Dr. Hasebe, and then she can add anything she wants, and we'll kind of transition. Dr. Hasebe is an associate professor of educational psychology in the School of Education. She received her doctorate from the University of Illinois, Chicago, and completed a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of California, Berkeley. Her research focuses on an examination of moral development that looks at people's views on unprovoked harm and welfare in comparison to social conventions and a line of virtuous characters. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Hasebe.
Thank you, Dr. Daytoner, and everybody, good to see you. And thank you for joining this session out of your busy schedule. So Katrina mentioned everything about my research background. The only thing I needed to add is that my teeth are all wired up with bracket and everything. So if you see me some weird movement around here, that's what it is. And it's a little harder to speak with wired inside. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about today is empirical data that is not agreeing with majority's opinion about social views of what morality is and how to teach it. And by disagreeing with the majority's opinion does not mean that I believe that there is only one way to teach morality. In fact, moral education requires multifaceted approach. For example, the aspect of emotion. Like most of us, if we see somebody kicking a dog sleeping soundly on the street, our emotion immediately kicks in and feel, no, right? So that is a moral instinct, except some few percent of people we do have that moral intuition or emotion. That is a very important part of a moral core that moral education needs to recognize and try to develop. As much as that moral instinct is that important, we know if we heavily rely on emotion and emotion alone for moral reasoning and judgment or justification, then our reasoning, moral perception is not going to be as objective as it should be regarding fairness for everybody. So the emotion needs to be enhanced, at the same time needs to be cultivated or tamed. So emotional regulation is also an important part of moral education. Morality is also considered to be in line with intelligence. I don't necessarily like using the term intelligence because people's definition of intelligence can differ from one person to the other. But what I mean by intelligence is ability to construct or comprehend abstraction, to get into the higher moral perception. So intelligence is definitely part of it, related to the moral view. For that, moral education also needs to look at the aspect of cognitive psychology and also physiological psychology, such as brain functioning. Okay, so what I meant as this data objecting a majority's view is philosophical view of what morality is. Okay, and the data I'm going to present today is based on the domain theory. I'm going to change the domain theory of social cognitive development, originally developed by Turiel when he was working at the Harvard University as a professor. And later on, Nucci, Nucci joined, and Smetana also joined at the same time, and they developed into the full portion. I joined the group early 2000, and I am still the part of the group. And it was just a coincidence that Nucci was also talking about the similar data at the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine at the UC Berkeley just a few months ago. So I thought I should have put that the illustration so you see that what he looks like. Okay, so we're taking 1 hour out of our busy schedule to look at this data. Why this is worth your time. So there are 4 different reasons I picked. Domain theory, number 1, why it is worth your time to listen is domain theory quantified notion of morality, which other theories did not. Quantified means that we are able to define morality by number, the empirical data. And by doing that, domain theory separated moral segment from non-moral issues such as virtues like honesty or social conventions that have been integrated or cluttered all together under traditional moral education. By number, we are able to qualitatively separate moral domain from non-moral domains. So, and then by doing this research, we are able to think about paradigm shift. Current view of moral education or philosophical idea that current moral education is based on is moral subjectivity and moral pluralism. That means that each individual person has a different moral view, and that's all right. Our moral view, our moral code is different because of a different upbringing, experience, and a religious belief. And number 4, but then we figured out that it seems like there is a moral, universal morality that everybody's agreeing with as a consensus. By universal morality, I do not mean a moral decisions, but it is strictly means moral principle, the concept. And user-friendly. When we use the domain approach to do the moral education, it is pretty user-friendly. Like I would almost call it just the moral education for the dummies, like one of the books. It's pretty easy. We do use constructivism. Traditional moral education use one or the other, such as a fancy word, nativistic approach or behavioristic approach. And constructivistic approach has been discussed a lot at undergrad and graduate level in the cognitive psychology, but it seems to be, it's not really well ingrained to actual pedagogical instruction. So we try to use the constructivist approach. And the point of our teaching is, and we do have a teaching method, instruction, everything. So that's one of the reasons user-friendly. One of the points that we try to bring up for the sake of cognitive psychology is that for us to learn to get to the next level of a moral view, we need instability. Instability, we need pain. Stability is almost like a cognitive death. So we try to artificially create some kind of chemicals to shake up the people's current view and create instability or disequilibrium and bring them into the next level of a moral view. So it's just the core of our pedagogy. All right, so I was just talking to Nucci last week, and we celebrated his book, 2022. The book published in 2021, which is last year, that received 2022 Book Award by ARA, American Educational Research Association. and the name is Moral Education and Social Justice. I have the first edition of this book, and I have been using, I love the title, Nice is Not Enough. That explains actually everything about what morality is. Nice is not enough, honesty is not enough. And I have been using this book again as moral education for dummies like myself. It's easy to apply, and the theory is fun. And I found out that this became out of print just about 4 years ago. I was in shock because I thought that this is really usable. But then Nucci and other student wrote together the second edition, and it ended up receiving an award. So someone else liked the book, and I was excited about it. So far, am I clear? Everything is okay? All right, so let's get into the full swing. So here's a question. What is morality? I asked this question on my students in psychology class undergraduate. And most of the time I get the one pattern of response from all of my students. They say, well, people who have high moral means that they know what is socially right versus what is wrong. And students tend to agree with this idea. So socially right versus wrong. That's always something I hear when I ask that question. And then somebody always said that, but then what is wrong, what is right? It should be different depending on the society. Yeah, so they come up with agreement. So everybody's different, everybody's moral code should be different, and that's all right. Then I ask, what are those factors that would diversify the people's moral code? They say all kinds of things, and culture and education, personality, upbringing, and they normally come up with the one word, religion. My students seem to think that religion is actually the biggie to mold and differentiate the person's moral code, differentiating from one person to the another. So here's the idea. When we talk about the definition of morality, these words seems to be always part of it, socially right versus wrong, and everybody's different. People use this phrase almost like celebrating the notion of a democratic society, and the people love it. And therefore, we need to be understanding each other's difference. And then they normally believe that religion and morality is inseparable. So that means that we cannot discuss morality apart from our religious belief. That's the common idea. So these ideas that my students are addressing is straightforward reflection of current social belief of moral subjectivity and moral pluralism. Actually, again, moral pluralism, my understanding is each person has a different moral code, and it's okay. There are many truths. So I wanted to show this one. When we talk about the two philosophical views as moral pluralism, this is kind of what I see. Like everybody likes it. Doesn't mean that all of the students in that class hearing that what is wrong and what is right is agreeing. Some of the students I can see from their facial expression that they seem to think that, well, morality means that socially wrong versus right. That phrase alone cannot fully explain the complexity of human morality. But then they do not really know what else they can say to rebuttal or adds up. So I normally see that when we talk about everybody's different idea, like people go, yeah, that's right. And then when I mention how about moral universality, everybody has same moral notion, principle. And then people normally go, like, meh. So, but then the question is this, or challenge is this. this moral pluralism or subjectivity that people seem to agree immediately has never been empirically supported, but we are agreeing anyway, and we are using that philosophical ground to create many different types of moral education pedagogies, and we spend so much money trying to make children to be more moral. Okay. The term moral education and character education have been used more interchangeably. It started out with a moral education, but at the time of Clinton's administration as a former US president, I believe he's the one who changed the terminology moral education to character education. The reason is that based on the moral subjectivity, if the teacher in a classroom is talking about his or her own moral code to 50 students in a classroom, that can be the violation of the other student moral code. And the premise of the morality is different from one person to the other. So he changed the moral education to calling it to character education so that we can put any kinds of virtues into it. So now the illustration of what we are doing as current moral education is what I call all in one. Bag of virtue construct education. Inside of the bag, what we see is honesty, responsibility, kindness. Those are very important human quality, and we all want to be seen as a nice person, niceness as one of the virtues. And fairness, justice, part of it. Some social regulations, rules are also part of it, part of the character education. So all in one. Like when I cook my soup, I open up the refrigerator and then I see anything that is there and put everything I see, everything I can touch, I throw in and then just cook. So, however, almost 100 years ago, there was already research coming from the University of Chicago challenging this idea of virtue education, especially focusing on acts of honesty, because honesty seems to be always one major thing that more educators want to educate the children with. So they studied the act of honesty, but then so children from different background, educational background joined. Some of them are church goers and going to the Sunday school every week faithfully, and some are totally secular education. Some goes to Christian school, a different type of a religious school. So the bunch of children attended this the research, and they were told that it is to test your eye and hand coordination. But actually, this research was testing how often they lie about the game, result of the game, because they were supposed to get some award or reward, depending on how many right answer they could get. So the study of act of honesty, the result is that regardless of the type of school, or religious education or non-religious education, the finding is everybody lied. Everybody lied so-so in the same level, so that the curve, the number of the statistical, the curve goes like a bell curve, because everybody's so-so lying. And so the conclusion, theoretical implication is that if everybody is so-so honest and so-so dishonest, honesty is not a trait. By trait, I mean, it's not like people are born with brown eyes versus blue eyes. So trying to educate the children to be honest versus dishonest, it's not realistic because there's no such a thing as a trait. So this is a really like big change, a challenge for the research, but we continue to do research on honesty, niceness as a big part of moral education. 1960s, Kohlberg came up with the 6-stage theory as to how human morality develops. So he was straightforward against this virtue education, calling it morality. And he was saying that if it is morality, it's not about being nice. It's not about being honest. It's about other people's welfare. So Kohlberg and Eliot, actually, Eliot was, Turiel was Kohlberg's student. They worked together at Harvard. Okay, so Kohlberg was totally against the character construct education, and domain theorists are too. So I'm going to show you that research data B, what we found through domain approach. There you go. This is a finding from an interview study done by Turiel and Nucci, and it was an interview with the kindergarten children, 4-year-old people, about the rule violation of different types of actions at the playground. Actually, starting out with the children coming out of the room inside of a kindergarten school and walking through that hallway and then playing at the playground. So this was happening, running and screaming on a hallway. So this is a rule A violation, because they're supposed to be quiet. They're supposed to be not to run on a hallway. So the researcher asked the 4-year-old girl, did you see what happened? Yes, they are noisy. And some of them said they're running. Is that something you're supposed to do or not supposed to do? Not do. The red transcript is the children's response. Is there a rule about that? Yes, we are to be quiet. Some of them said, Big Bob said that we're not supposed to run, we are supposed to walk. Is there a rule about it? Yes, we have to be quiet and not to run. What if there are no rule? Would it be all right to do them? And then children say, yes. Why? Because Big Bob said it's all right. So there is no rule. And there was another incident happening. This happens all the time. Somebody cannot wait for her or his turn for play, toy, food, so they become forceful. And the little one is crying. And the researcher is seeing that it is happening, and they went to the one of the kindergarten kids and then interviewed. Rule B violation. Did you see what happened? Yes, they're playing and John hit him too hard. Is that something you're supposed to do or not supposed to do? Not so hard to hurt. So I guess hitting soft is okay. Is there a rule about that? Yes. What is a rule? You're not to hit hard. What if there are no rule about hitting hard? Would it be right to do then? No. Why not? Because he could get hurt and start to cry. Response to violation of 2 rules, and reminding you of that this data comes from 4-year-old children. When they see the rule violation, violation of a conventional rule, like running on a hallway, they view that violation as a situational, and it is authority contingent. That means it's local. Some areas may have this rule, and doesn't mean your country or your group needs to have the same rule. And if boss said, we don't need a rule, we're going to remove it, it's okay not to do or to break the rule. And rule is subjectivity and the local. But when it comes to the action, deliberate action, consequentially hurt other people, 4-year-old children reason out totally differently. It is, the action is non-contingent of anything, anybody, There is a rule objectivity and rule generalizability. Means that the rule is not going to be applied for local group, but it's going to be applied to anybody, anything, all outside of my group. And they tend to see the violation of this type of thing as more serious, more punitive than conventional rule violation. So what we are looking at this is that there is a systematic way they differentiate, 4-year-old people differentiate convention and moral transgression systematically. They treat these two totally as a different type of behavior. So what I looked at is, are there any factors that would interfere with this normative pattern of the way people separate conventional rule transgression versus moral rule transgression? And one of the things I looked at is personality propensity, aggression, aggressive children versus passive children. And how did I describe aggression and passivity? As the degree of self-definition of being peer bullies versus bully victims, and neither. I have never bullied anybody. I have never been bullied by anybody before. And they responded to some of the questions for 2 different types of actions. One is a group of what is called a moral transgression, which is straightforward, deliberate action that hurt the other person, significant harm to other people, such as, the car is seriously defect, and then you're still selling it, knowing that that would get the buyer into the serious accident at any minute, but you don't reveal it. So it's a moral transgression. And peer bullying without any justification, that is also moral transgression. Morally aimed dishonesty means that, so the person who is selling the defect car is sharing what he's doing to the person B. So the person B now knows the secret. So the person B is concerned, but then the person said to the seller, okay, I'm not gonna tell anybody. So there is an agreement between the seller and his friend. But later on, his friend goes to the person who bought the car and said, hey, what you did not know is your car is very, very dangerous. You better blah, blah, blah. So this is, I call it morally aimed dishonesty. The question, 2 questions we asked is, are these actions right to do? And number 2 question is, do you have a right to engage in this type of action? What I found interesting is that there is a difference between peer bullies and bully victims. By comparison with those 2 groups, peer bullies tend to think that they have a greater entitlement to engage in a moral transgression like bullying or selling those defect car compared to bully victims and neithers. What I found even more interesting is this. When it comes to peer bullies' response to morally aimed dishonesty, the pattern of their response came with actually no specific pattern. So some say yes, some say no. There's no specific pattern. That probably means that they don't know what to do with this type of action. They can say when it comes to moral transgression, they say, it's okay. I mean, compared to more bully victims, they can say it's okay and I have a right to do it. It's a very clear pattern there. But when it comes to doing dishonest, lying, breaking treaty, breaking promise, but the breaking promise is to uphold moral aim, to sustain somebody's welfare, that was like almost like it was too hard, too complex for the peer bullies to comprehend. So basically, altogether, peer bullies bully victims and neither altogether still separated systematically morally aimed dishonesty versus moral transgression. So even though there was a difference between peer bullies and bully victims, does not mean peer bullies do not systematically differentiate these two, conventional transgression versus moral transgression. They do. So their pattern also fit in the normative pattern that you saw through the interview study. So they and we did a lot of studies together domestically and also internationally. So what we found is based on their justification of why these actions should never be happening, and it is generalizable and it's not rule contingent, nothing, it's absolutely wrong. There is a moral consensus. The moral consensus we saw is they're saying it's wrong to hurt the innocent. So this seems to be the core of a moral principle that we seem to agree with, and it is regardless of any kind of social and interpersonal diversities. So morality, by our definition, by data, morality is interpersonal action pertaining to the welfare, well-being of other people in the context of interpersonal social interaction with a consensus of anti-gratuitous harm. So that's the notion of justice and fairness. And we found no disagreement when it comes to this idea of it's wrong to hurt the innocent. Again, this is a notion. So that means that we agree with this notion, but then how do we define who is innocent and who is not innocent? So our views of the conventions and the status, everything that interfere with our view. So the moral decisions can be different from person to person, and there is some complexity in that. But when it comes to a moral concept, there is agreement. So we state moral universality as opposed to moral subjectivity. Now, the second big question is, how about religion? Does the normative pattern also apply to religious people? Because we believe that religion and morality are inseparable. And here's the data. It's a little like a lot of a colorful thing. In one study, they asked that those are the participants are children. I believe those are fifth graders. You see the three different aspects of the question. Alterability means rule alterability. Is that okay to change the rule? You're like a pope, the leader of your religion, change the rule. Would that be all right? A is Amish. Those are very, very religious children. C is, what is that? Conservative? Jewish. O is Orthodox Jewish. Second one, generalizability means, is this rule local or should it be applied to anybody else outside of your religious group? And then number three, this is the fun thing. If your God says nothing about this rule, would that be okay not to do, or would that be wrong? So the question is, would that be wrong to alter or not generalize, or you break the rule if God says nothing about it? So these are the conventional religious convention: keeping day of worship, baptism, circumcision, not wearing head coverings. Those the rules are very important for those children. They view those rules important. And here, moral issues. What belongs to moral issues versus non-moral? These are coming from the previous data with the secular children, such as stealing, hitting, slander, property damage. fitting the idea of deliberate action, hurting the innocent. So the person who gets this type of treatment really did not provoke anything to deserve this. If you look at this red numbers, you can see alterability. 53% of those children said it would be wrong to change those rules. 3% of the children said it would be wrong not to generalizable these rules. So basically saying that people outside of my religious group, it's okay not to do this type of a thing. It's totally okay. It's our rule. It doesn't apply to your world. And here, if God doesn't say anything about baptism, circumcision, it's okay not to do. So only 3% said it would be wrong not to do. And the premise of God said nothing. But look at this, the moral average. Almost 100% of the children says it's wrong to change the rule about the stealing. It's not okay not to generalize. So they're saying all those things, no to these things are generalizable, as opposed to 3% of those rules. And if God doesn't say anything about, against these things, would that be okay or would that be wrong? And almost 100% of the children said, no matter what, it would be wrong. Even God said it's okay to go ahead. So this actually, this fit the way these religious children systematically separate conventional rules versus moral rules, straightforward fit the normative pattern that we got from non-religious children. Religious children separate rule, conventional from moral rules in an exactly same way than non-religious children separate those two aspects. So I make it very, just simple for the vision, God's word. It would be wrong to criterion judgment. Religion A group, 2, number 3, when it comes to non-moral issues, religious convention, again, reminding you, these are children who take those religious conventions very seriously. 3% to 6% of them said it would be wrong. And the moral, 90% to 100% of children said it would be wrong, even if God said nothing about it. Now, going back to the previous data, you see the 83%. So 80%, 87%, it's kind of the same. It's weird. But what we found is justification for them to say it would be still wrong to alter the rule, and they said justification for wrong, being wrong to this one or alter, justification is totally different. Here, when they justify their answer, why it should not be altered, they mention welfare of other people, whereas welfare justification is not part of this religious convention. Now, so this is a data from 5th graders. Now we look at the data from older kids, the high school and the university, high school, university. So they are like 15 to 22-year-old. And they asked 2 different questions. It'll be wrong or okay for Pope or cardinals to drop the rule about the act. So here they're asking rule alterability. And here it's a generalizability, I believe. Suppose another religion B has no rule or law about the act. Would that be okay or wrong for a member of religion B to do the act? So it's a generalizability of the rule. When it comes to church convention, no attending service on Sunday, eating 15 minutes before, those are the Catholic children. Receiving communion without the confession and ordaining women. less than half, 50% of children, youth, and here the 20%, the quarter of children said that would be wrong to change the rules. And again, the justification has nothing to do with a person's welfare or well-being. And this is the same way, 20% said it would be wrong for the religion B who does not belong to the Catholic group do or not to do. They also asked about sexual conventions. The funny thing is that sexuality is taught within that group as an aspect of morality, but actually those children are not considering sexuality or sexual act as under the moral issues. So when it comes to premarital sex, would that be all right to change the rule about, no to premarital sex, no to this. 12% of a Catholic high school and university students said that it would not be wrong to change. Would that be okay for the religion B not to follow the Catholic rules about these things? And the 17, 20, or 12 or 8% of those youth said that it would be wrong. So basically they're saying, no, it's okay. If you're not belonging to my group, that's okay to do those things. Now look at how they responded to moral issues. Hitting and hurting, rape, murder, kidnap and ransom, damage others' home, slander, betrayal of the personal secrets, and ridiculing physically handicapped, and high school kids. And you can just go here. Almost 100% of those people said it's wrong to rule, change, or drop the rule about each act. And it's wrong to engage in any of those acts, even if you do not, you're not part of the Catholic group. So here's a simplified one. Their response to rule alteration and removal, and generalizability of a rule for church convention, sexual convention versus moral rules. Less than 20% or the 13% of children said, youth said it would be wrong. But again, the justification has nothing to do with welfare. Whereas almost 100% of those children, religious children, said that would be wrong to change the rule and go ahead and do this. And that would be wrong for the religion B, do this actions. So the way they separated or reason out and separate conventional rule versus moral rules exactly same as non-religious children separated those two aspects. So here's a conclusion, some thought. How about thinking about there might be a paradigm shift? Our character education has heavily built upon the idea of moral pluralism. Everybody has a different moral code, moral belief. And based on that, we develop moral education. It's a big one. However, the data is contradicting this educational practice and the view, and finding that there is a moral universality. Again, it's a principle. I'm not talking about the moral decisions, moral justifications, and we have extensive research on the decisions and justifications as well. So if there is a paradigm shift, moral education really needs to have some reconsideration, looking from the bottom to top. Number two, it's important to apply some scientific approach, means that looking psychology from science. And there is a critical importance to look into morality through theory-based morality as opposed to the definition of morality based on subjectivity and speculation or liking or not liking. Again, just to remind you that moral pluralism or moral subjectivity, which has been vastly supported, has never been empirically supported to my knowledge. We use a 4-domain distinction model. We'll go there later. Scientific method, debate, identify, discuss, integrate. Okay. By using scientific approach of the domain theory that divides things like that, morality is different from personal domain, different from prudential domain and conventional. So moral domain contains the action and belief regarding to other people's welfare, whereas a prudential domain contains the items, behaviors, belief regarding to own the welfare of the person who is engaged in the action, such as child climbing a tall tree, which is risking his or her welfare. And the personal domain contains the area that people normally view as strictly of privacy. And they feel that they have a full entitlement to make decision about, and nobody can say anything about what I believe is personal. And the conventional is prototypical social convention, could be the personal convention as well. So what we found is that people systematically differentiate in a way they treat one domain from the other. So the research we have been doing is how each domain develop in a human and how each domain develop independently and interactively. So there is a benefit of using the theory-based morality, especially when the data contradict to the biggie of moral pluralism is being considered the right thing, and all the moral education is actually built upon it. So if the foundation is different, I mean, foundation is wrong, pedagogy is wrong. And if the foundation is wrong and the pedagogy is wrong, automatically the fruit, there will be very little fruit in terms of a moral education. And in fact, Kohlberg was very strict about coming against the character education, saying that the traditional moral education, and well, Clinton calls it a character education, is not just not working, but also it is actually damaging the students or learners' comprehension of moral view. So it is actually stopping moral development. And another thing, one more thing that actually the domain theory approach can do, I found it's thrilling, is this. If you look at the pro-life and the pro-choice debate, and the people actually, okay, 5 minutes, thank you. People actually see, okay, let me just quickly say. So this is a traditional moral education all in one. If we use different philosophical ground, there is a consensus in terms of what morality is. This base needs to be changed like this. I call it two-bag theory. Social conventions and the virtues and the morality, those do not belong in the same bag because they are qualitatively different animals. So they need to be treated. They need to be taught or constructed in totally different ways. Two different animals, two different ways to develop. But currently we're doing everything all together. Therefore, some of us believe that there is no moral development, social morality. And again, this is very important. The person who has high virtuous trait in action does not mean the person also has high morality or ability to getting into the high moral perception. They don't necessarily, the development of A and the B group do not necessarily develop in a correlation to each other. Since we don't have time, I'm not gonna get into the depth, but last thing I want to show is this one. So we have the debate, and using this debate, many people say, see, our morality do not agree. You have your morality, I have my morality, you know, the aborting the pregnancy. So pro-life group would say that's totally wrong, because justification, there are many different justifications, but one of them is that the embryo's personhood begins at the time of conception. Doesn't have to be anatomically functioning fully. It starts at the time of conception. So aborting the pregnancy is considered murdering a human, and it's morally wrong. Whereas pro-choice group would say, I see your point that it is a human, but up until a certain trimester, that embryo or the thing does not have a personhood. Therefore, I do not agree it is a fully human. So therefore, it's not the same as killing a human. And then through that disagreement, the society see that, see, those are moral dualism. So there is no such a thing as moral universality. But if we look at this, we do the dissect analysis using these and how people view and reason differently between among those four. This is supposed to be moral debate. But the idea of when it is considered that the egg is a human or has personhood, that's conventional debate. So they're trying to make moral decision based on a conventional aspect. So this is not really the moral debate they're doing, but then using the conventional debate, they're making or deciding moral decision. So this debate alone is not sufficient enough based on domain dissect approach. Okay, so this is all I have. Jill, I believe that I fit in 30 minutes. Oh. So we'll go Q&A. If anybody has a question, or I would rather not to be the only person who is talking, and I welcome anybody to join in the answer, ask questions and the answer.
I'll ask one. If everybody has this sense of morality, then why have any education about it if 4-year-olds understand it?
If everybody has the sense of that, why there is no education based on that?
Why have any at all? It doesn't seem needed. It sounds like people have an intuitive sense that you don't harm one another. So what would the education focus on?
The education would be focusing on construct. There is a emotional instinct, seems like, and people say, well, not everybody, but we found that people who are considered more like a psychopath and who do not operate on that idea of it's wrong to hurt the innocent, it's really the minority, like up to around 3%. However, that we are born with that moral instinct does not mean that it is fully developed. Like we have equipment, but we don't know how to use it. And morality is not emotion. Morality needs to be cultivated through reasoning. And some people would say that morality is intelligence, and it needs to be cultivated. And that's why Kohlberg's theory has 6 stages. Everybody start out with a stage 1. Yeah, and then develop. And this development does not happen when it is left alone. Like I said at the beginning of the session, the development only start or happen when there is a proper chemical, like instability. And then when the person feel that there is a challenge coming into their own current moral stage, so their current level of moral perception gets broken down, which is not a comfortable thing. It's a painful thing because it's a challenge coming against your belief. And then if the person keeps thinking about it cognitively, so that requires intelligence to shuffle different ideas, abstract idea of different, outside of your own comfortable zone, and comprehend, and then coming out of the next stage. But we found that for a person to become different people in a moral stage, at least small qualitative change, it's going to take at least 5 years. It's a quite a work.
Looks like we have another question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, mine is not a question. I just want to add to what Professor Yuki just said now. I think it may be necessary to always bring this up, because even though we may assume that people have this moral instinct in them, in communication, you have this inoculation theory. The assumption is that maybe sometimes somebody might be coming to give you an argument against what you already believe. So there's this inoculation theory that says, okay, give the person like another message just to prepare, to let the person know your belief is going to be maybe threatened. Somebody might try to change your mind. And so for that reason, you give that person the message, believing that if he or she comes across anything that says, okay, although you have these moral beliefs, I don't think it's okay, you can do whatever you like, such a person will be prepared. I'm trying to add to what you said in response to the questioner. So there's a need to always, keep talking about these things, because if you don't, some people do the right thing, they may not even know why they're doing it. So talks like this, moral education may help to let them know why they are doing it and why they should continue to do the right thing. Well, that's from my own lay point of view. I just thought I should say that. I should add that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
Well, I was just a quick fun talk. It was 3 weeks ago. I had a chance to talk with Dr. Tomio Petrosky. He's in the physics, senior researcher at University of Texas, and he worked with and he was a student, and he worked with a physicist who received a Nobel Prize, and they work together for for something that I'll never be able to understand, but he made his presentation. We had a social interaction and did some presentation. And point of his talk was that against social belief, what we need in a physics, what makes things grow is instability. So instability is extremely important for growth and the development of something in their realm. And that was exactly what Piaget was saying. Stability, equilibrium is a death of cognition. So to bring out the abstraction part of a human brain, always there needs to be some kind of a pain that, to cause chemical change, but right amount of chemical change and giving it, artificially creating. And if the learner is willing to look at it, so the willingness of the learner is extremely important, as many of us tend to spit out when there is this probably is a response to the student statement. Yeah, I mean, when we get some disagreement, it's painful and we don't take time, we spit it out and forget about it. But then when there is some different idea comes in, and then if we are willing to take it and try to make point out of the chaos, then that's the point, that's the strategy to develop a cognition or ability for comprehend abstraction. So the instability is the key. So the teacher's role actually is understanding where the student is, whatever the more, whether it is mathematics, social science, or moral education, the teacher needs to identify where the student current level is. And then in order to bring this out to the next level, so she or he needs to know what kind of chemicals that she or he needs to put in so that there will be some chemical reaction, which is painful for the student. And also the students, that would be the benefit that students are trained to like the pain at the earlier age. That would help the learning process, or the children to accept the learning process, the pain not necessarily as a negative always, but positive. One of Nucci's PhD student came as a Christian. He came after I was at UIC, and his belief, Jack's belief was that lying is wrong. It's totally wrong. And he took like 8 years to finish his PhD under Nucci. So 8 years ago, he came as a young man and believing lying absolutely wrong. It's against my Christian belief. And when he graduated with a PhD, his idea is lying is okay. So, so Nucci said that that's the best thing that happened to him. Of course, he meant is lying is okay if it is to uphold moral position. Oh, and then my experience, my personal experience is that when I mentioned that moral universality, so there's no difference when it comes to moral principle between religious people such as Christian and our data has many other different religions also, religious people versus non-religious people. My Christian friends tend not to like it, and they tend to view that is an abomination to the God. Like we're proud of being Christian, having Christian morality. And actually Christian parents are willing to send out their children to Christian school, not to the public schools, with the belief that public schools cannot provide a moral education that is in line with the Christian morality. So therefore, they're spending more money and sending out their children to Christian schools. But then finding the moral universality, I have to say it's by no means it is a abomination to the gods or Christianity. It's actually helped me to look into what it is that God's or Christian morality is really about. And I come up with simply saying that Christianity is not about being nice, not about the hugging, saying something nice. It's really about the redemption of the human welfare in a very significant way. So I use this domain theory in order to look into what it is really the Christian morality is. And my conclusion is it's by no means abomination. It is a in-depth analysis of what Christian morality is. And that Christian morality actually is connected to the human morality. The bottom line is the same. That's how I feel. And again, as a reminder, agreeing with a moral concept does not mean there is agreement in moral decision, people's moral decision. Moral concept is universal, data says. Moral decisions, moral justifications vary among people. And why we did not find this moral universality, but people tend to be quick to say, yes, moral subjectivity, I'm loving it, pluralism, that's wonderful. That's the notion of democracy, right? They believe, they connect those two. And I understand that. Why we didn't see the moral universality existing, actually, it's like a little blind spot. So if we really listen to the people's discussion, debate really closely, we see that it's just a blind spot. We tend to, we have missed out. I'm done. So Jill, do we have more